Josephus, who was a Jewish historian in the first century, wrote about half a dozen other messianic figures that sound a lot like Jesus. What this means is that this motif was not all that uncommon. Josephus even mentions Jesus himself twice and his brother James. Of course, mythicists will turn around and say, no, he didn't, and that's kind of the problem. Any argument for the historical Jesus is just kind of brushed off by mythicists.
Well, he could be talking about just general people on the internet that are having these discussions with him and are unwilling to back up their information. I encourage everybody in this discussion to back up their claims with evidence. And don't brush off arguments against your position. Take the time to really consider the evidence and the claim, and then explain why their evidence doesn't convince you of their claim. For instance, he claims that there are 2 instances in Josephus that refer to Jesus and Jesus' brother James. I actually have 2 clipped videos on my GE Shorts channel that deals with both of these references in Josephus. So I highly implore you that if you want all of the information, all of the citations and everything like that, definitely go to those videos if you want to know more. In short, critical scholars have shown that the only version of the Testimonium Flavianum that has ever existed is the one that we currently have. The one with all of the very Christianized phrases in it. And that could not have been written by Josephus. The style and content of the Testimonium Flavianum are not characteristically Josephine. People arguing for a partial interpolation of the Testimonium Flavianum have to change the Testimonium in order to make it sound more Josephine, considering that no other version of the Testimonium Flavianum has existed. It makes no sense to me why you would change the passage to be more Josephine and then claim that Josephus wrote about Jesus. Now, there are a lot of details that I've left out of this elevator pitch against the Testimonium Flavianum, but it does show how we're not just merely brushing off this argument. We have real reasons to reject this particular reference to Jesus. The same can be said about the James reference. The elevator pitch for that reference would be that as the current text stands, it makes no sense for Josephus to be referring to Jesus Christ. For one thing, the James in that passage dies completely differently than church tradition generally envisions James's death. It also doesn't explain why a completely different Jesus is put into James's position later, when at the time it was customary to replace one murdered person in a position with somebody that they're kin to, like Jesus ben Damnius. This passage most likely mentioned that James and Jesus were ben Damnius. That makes this an accidental interpolation where a marginal note was mistaken for a correction. Again, this doesn't explicitly state all the evidence we have to make these claims, but it does let people know that we are not just simply brushing this particular reference off. We are definitely carefully scrutinizing this section with all the available evidence. Now, I do agree that Josephus mentions a lot of failed messiahs in his works, so it was definitely a common motif at the time. I completely agree with Dadpool on this point, but I also think that it makes it harder to discern a historical Jesus.
Trust me, I've had these conversations with him and I've done the research myself. I've even read the book.
Well, I know that Captain Dadpool has had a conversation with me directly on this topic, and in that interaction, I directly asked Captain Dadpool after a more than an hour-long conversation about mythicism and mythicist claims, what exactly have I just dismissed or brushed off without good reason?
We started out this with you thinking that mythicists just sort of dismiss things. And I'm wondering if through our conversation, do you feel like I've just dismissed anything without reason?
I don't know if without reason is the best word. It's more like you have to cling to more fringe ideas in order to make them work. If that makes sense.
Like what fringe idea have I espoused?
Just
Other
that
than Jesus didn't exist.
no, just that Jesus was not actually born of a woman. He didn't actually, like, he was a fleshly being, but he was created in the firmament. Things like that almost no scholar is going to agree with.
I would need a citation for that no scholar would agree with that.
Almost no scholar. You're going to find scholars that are going to agree with you, no matter what. You could, again, there are atheist flat earthers. You're going to be able to find a scholar who agrees with you.
So why does it matter?
Because there's always going to be people out there who want to cling to fringe theories.
No. I mean, like, why does it matter that almost no scholar would agree with those interpretations of things, even though they're literally in, like, documents that are in the Bible and
stuff?
Because
if it was an idea that was worth entertaining, more people would entertain it.
In this particular field, I mean, do you really think so? They entertain the idea that a Jew was pinned to a stick and then resurrected.
So it seems like his claim that he's had conversations with mythicists and that they've done nothing but brush off arguments against mythicism isn't all that exactly representative of reality. He seems to have a problem with the fact that most New Testament and biblical scholars won't agree with every single aspect of mythicism. Keep in mind, though, that New Testament scholarship and biblical scholarship, it's a fringe idea to consider that the resurrection wasn't a historical event.
I think he's completely wrong. I think the consensus of New Testament scholars would say Jesus was raised from the dead. Because the vast majority of New Testament scholars are Christians. I mean, I'm an odd duck.
Now, that's not to say that Captain Dadpool didn't have counterpoints to my arguments. But the fact that I want to focus on here is that I did not just brush off any of his arguments against my position. I am also very happy that Captain Dadpool has read the only academically reviewed mythicist position. So I would assume that there wouldn't be any misrepresentation of the minimal mythicist position in this video. I mean, he can just crack that bad boy open and confirm that he's steel manning our position. So really, I shouldn't have any disagreement with what he thinks the minimal mythicist position is. I mean, at the very least, he should get the hypothesis correct. But more importantly, this means that he's interacting with the academic mythicist position and not just some rando crackpots online. But still, this further confuses me because he's claimed that mythicists just brush off the evidence for historical Jesus, which implies that we haven't scrutinized the evidence for historical Jesus yet. At the same time, he's holding an 800+ page book that handles all of the evidence for a historical Jesus. My mind is boggled and I don't understand.